All right. Kicking off the second of a two-part series discussing Adobe Stock's creative trends forecast for 2022. Today, with the focus on Japan. So, this is the first year that the Adobe Stock team has come out with trends specific to the Japanese market. I'm excited to be joined by my colleague, Ayaka Matsuda, who is the marketing associate in our Tokyo office, and our guest of honor. Thank you for joining again, Brenda Mills, the Principal of Creative Services and Visual Trends for Adobe Stock.
Hello.
In case somebody missed the first interview, and this is the first time they're joining us, please, can you just share a little bit about yourself, Brenda?
Hey, everybody. So again, I'm Brenda Mills, and I am with Adobe Stock. And my long title actually means that what I do is I lead all the programs and initiatives that are tied to visual trends. So creative trends. We had spoken about global creative trends. We're about to talk about Japan-specific visual trends. I also lead all programs that center on seasonal trends, as well as industry and demographic trends. And the reason this is a kind of pillar or a role at Adobe Stock, the reason trends are in fact important to cover and to stay aware of where which types of images are becoming and will continue to become more and more popular are because people who come to Stock and are looking for images are often working on projects that will go public or will be pushed out a bit in the future. So if I'm looking for an image and I'm working maybe on a campaign, that image for my company might not go public anywhere from 1 month to 9 months. So customers are very concerned that the images they choose from Stock, they license from Stock, that when they go public, they will be relevant and authentic and engage consumers at that time. And as we know, we live in a very quickly changing world right now, and one that is very visual by nature, and everyone in the world is ingesting more and more images every day, all day than ever before. Having this constant flow of images and living in a world that is changing so quickly is making the creative landscape or the visual landscape change very quickly. So what the value that I add to Adobe and to creative professionals is helping them understand where consumer interest or viewer interest, where it's moving, so that the images that we pull into and offer at Adobe Stock follow these trends, and that customers are aware of where viewer interest is headed so that they know how to pick things that are not only interesting now, but have some staying power, if you will.
Got it, got it. And why? Like, obviously, us at Beachbox, we're super excited because we're based in the US and in Japan. So, like, you choosing to forecast Japanese creative trends as a design and marketing agency, this is something that was of interest to us. Why did you choose Japan?
Well, Adobe is a global company, and yet Adobe Stock is only 6 years old. So it's a really relatively new stock content offering. And at first, the majority of our business was in the United States. But as we expand, as we grow, we have an absolute commitment to supporting every region. And Japan is a very important, very quickly growing marketplace. And so it was one of the first regions that we decided to focus on and create locally relevant forecasting, locally relevant trends to support the Japan Adobe Stock marketplace. Yeah, so it's a big priority for us because we see that marketplace growing, and it's so interesting how we live in a global community, but there are of course very specific local differences. So I'm working as quickly as I can to be able to support specific countries and specific regions, and Japan is one of the first. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And what has kind of been your impression of the 2022 kind of trends forecast for Japan, or kind of like what you've seen so far compared to the global one?
Well, I feel that they're very aligned. They're very related. There are two very specific visual trends that your team was crucial in helping us develop. One is based on the shift in family structure and therefore family relations. In English, we're calling the trend family ties. And it focuses on how the shifting family structure, which is becoming less multi-generational and more like the nuclear family here in America, which is parents and children. And the stress on the shift to parents going from being more of the disciplinarians to becoming more of almost a friend, that this kind of smaller family structure is slowly promoting more of closeness, more of an emotional connection and intimacy. And now globally, we also know that there's a huge prioritization of connection and emotional intimacy. And that's how I would say they're related. But this is Japan specific because of the shifting structure of Japanese families. The second, which in English we're calling open-minded, really focuses on a growing prioritization around mental health, mental and emotional well-being, and therefore a growing compassion and acceptance of diverse identities and diverse experiences in Japan. And that does once again align with a global opening to diversity in terms of identity and experience. But this is again based on Japan-specific campaigns we're seeing across all industries that are in fact representing and promoting a much wider range of identities and experiences, whether it's disabilities, sexual identities, etc., but just a much more diverse representation of what it is to be Japanese, which we see continuing to grow. So again, both of those are very much aligned with what we see going on in the world, but these trends are tied to what is specifically happening in Japan.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. So I want to ask you some questions. And
Sure.
So this is very interesting that you search the trends for where you don't live or where you never live. So I thought this is very difficult thing. So how do you usually decide a trend forecast for the places you haven't lived before or you aren't located in?
Absolutely. So for example, this is related to V-Tracks. I brought V-Tracks into this project to develop and confirm and then present Japanese specific visual trends because I'm clearly American and I knew that I needed to work with design and visual creatives that understand imagery and design, creative projects. So I brought V-Tracks on to work with myself and my group in Adobe stock to be able to work with Japanese reports, articles, campaigns. I don't speak Japanese, but even if I did speak Japanese, I wouldn't be able to rely on my own perception or my own way of coming to conclusions because I'm not part of Japanese culture. So again, this is very new, but anytime I'm starting to work in Latin America now, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm working with people who are design and visual and creative experts. So I came to V-Tracks to work with a whole team of people who are part of the Japanese culture, who understand and work with Japanese creative professionals across all types of visual and design projects. And that's really what I need. And that is what BTRAX delivered. Your team and your group works across many platforms, many industries, many types of creative projects. And so visual trends to be important and relevant to all industries and all sectors in the Japanese marketplace, it has to be relevant to every type of creative, visually focused project. And that's why we came to BTRAX and had a very positive and very productive and successful collaboration.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to hear that. Yeah. And for my next question, what do you think is the keywords as a whole for the 2022 Japanese trends?
Well, this is tough. I think you can't, there can't just be one. And also the two trends, I'll just try to give a few for each trend. So the diversity trend, that what we're calling open-minded, I would say the kind of the key adjectives would be compassion, acceptance, diversity, and identities, plural, identities. We've gone from, I work with the Japan group at Adobe Stock for some years. And when we used to talk about diversity, it was talking about a range of ages. That diversity meant that there are a huge range of ages in the consumer sector, but never body types, never sexual orientation, ethnicity, no, still not relevant, not a range of ethnicities. So the notion of what diversity is in the Japanese marketplace is expanding. So those would be compassion, acceptance, diversity, and identities seems to be expanding. Also, just to throw that in, the notion of gender, what it is expected to be female or male in terms of, what is expected from the two genders is slowly opening and shifting. So that's why I say identities, plural. Yeah. And then in terms of family ties, intimacy, connection, and closeness, those three, because we're really seeing that in visuals of family members having much more touch, much more emotional connection instead of maybe a more, authoritarian, almost separate relationship. Yeah. I hope that helps, because that was a lot of keywords. I hope that's helpful.
I mean, from our perspective, we find it very helpful, partially because, when we worked with you, there was a lot of kind of discussions around, what is a trend that is going to be for the whole year versus maybe like a short-term social trend and things like that, and kind of having to kind of look through and figure out what has staying power versus what may be part of or fall underneath the actual trend. So that's
exactly
super helpful.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is these annual visual trends do need to be exactly that. They need to be trends that we see have hit the mainstream at the beginning of the year, but we can forecast continuing to grow. And we do that through a huge range of qualitative and quantitative data. And that's, again, why it's important for us to see these trends growing across so many industries that are in fact unrelated. That's the unrelated industries, when they have campaigns using the same types of visuals to communicate the same type of message. That's when we know that we're seeing something that is very important, and importantly mainstream, important to virtually any type of viewer or consumer in Japan. And so they do need to be somewhat general. And as you two know, I'm working on releasing the Japanese social content trends, which, as you mentioned, John, are much harder to pinpoint. They're very important because social content and social platforms are so important because they're so influential, but you don't know how quickly how short or long term those trends will be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And this is my last question.
Sure.
Is you've decided for 2022 to have a Japan specific trends, and I'm wondering, before the 2021 trends, I guess, where basically they were regardless of region, there was agreement that these trends were the same across different regions. But I would
Yes.
imagine that, part of the decision around Japan was also, each region really does have their own specific trends, even if you're looking at global. So are you now looking at continuing with global, but also picking out certain
Yes.
regions? Is that kind of the direction things are going?
Yes, the direction is to expand as quickly as we can. In my perfect world, I would have team members in every region supporting this, but we're not quite there yet. And so, but yes, now our commitment is to support Japan every year and to hopefully expand and evolve that support. So this being the first time, which is great, and we've received a lot of really positive feedback. But again, this is the first time. The first time is just the beginning, so yeah. We will continue with Japan. I'm moving into Latin America now. So yeah, we're making strides to, again, acknowledge the fact and support the fact that while we do have global trends, they are more general. And so it is a huge priority and commitment on my part and on the part of Adobe to offer both, right? Because both are important. And also the global creative trends are always going to be important because a lot of Japanese companies have a global audience. So we feel it's just equally important to be able to support both, because global local isn't in itself a trend, meaning that a lot of industries and a lot of businesses are saying, how can we do both? Because we have both audiences and we need to address both parts of our business. Yeah.
You said it perfectly. And hopefully once we can start traveling more and more, travel has picked up, you can actually visit these places. So you can kind of get a better insight yourself, right? Because for the last 2 years now, you've had to just kind of do research on the desktop or rely on people that live in certain regions, which B-Tracks has benefited from by having the presence in Japan for a lot of our business and work and things like that. But it was a pleasure working with you.
There's nothing like the actual experience. Like someday I hope to meet you in person. Yeah, there's nothing like that. And it's almost impossible to describe how and why being with each other is a completely different experience, but it is. And I actually really like the mystery of that we know that being in person and visiting a place is a much more powerful and authentic experience than working and living virtually. And that's why, it's almost like a human need. And so we all do look forward to the moment and the time when we can be together again. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us about both the global trends and the Japanese specific trends. Really excited to kind of see where all this goes. And yeah, if anybody wants to read these trends, it's on the Adobe blog, I believe, and we'll be sharing them also in kind of the article that we create from this.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.